Flow meter number 2 counter readings from your TV monitor.
Flow meter number 1, 9,989. Flow meter number 2 is 9,985.
And prop 2 reports CDPS flow meter number 1 meter gallons.
9,989.3.
And prop 2 reports CDPS flow meter number 2 meter gallons.
9,985.3.
PEA, verify fuel load is acceptable.
Acceptable.
Prop 2 takes vehicle fuel, fill and drain, closed.
Fill and drain coming closed. Closed.
Prop 2 take fuel storage tank vent, open.
Storage tank vent coming open. Vent is open.
And prop 2 report when the storage tank pressure is less than 20 psi.
Copy, pending.
Prop 1, verify vehicle fuel tank prepress bank set at 27 plus or minus 3.
This is Delta Launch Control, T-minus 103 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. As we've heard, the loading of the RP-1 fuel into the Delta first stage is now complete. 9,989 gallons on board. That amount precisely calculated as what the first stage will need to put the rocket at the point in flight where we will be terminating the thrust of the first stage in preparation for stage separation and igniting the second stage. We're going to look now at a video that sums up our Delta II and GRAIL mission today. This video will give us some synopsis of our Delta II rocket and the GRAIL spacecraft and its mission.
The moon has captivated humanity's collective imagination since ancient times. Humans have studied it for hundreds of years, first with telescopes, then with robotic probes, even sending 12 American astronauts to the lunar surface. But in many ways, our nearest neighbor remains a mystery.
And so knowing what happened with the moon will help us understand what happened with the Earth, Venus, Mercury, and Mars. And so that's the reason we want to try to understand it. We're trying to understand the past formation of the planets, and so that will help us learn the future.
Clues about our own planet's history and the influence of the moon's gravity on Earth 240,000 miles away could be locked below that dusty lunar surface. The Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory Mission, or GRAIL, features twin spacecraft embarking on a challenging mission to map the moon's gravity.
Its sole purpose is to measure gravity of the moon, to try to help us understand how the planets were formed and how they evolved over time.
GRAIL's 2 spacecraft will fly in formation above the lunar surface to measure the variations in gravity. The mission seeks to reveal clues about our moon's thermal history and how the inner solar system's rocky planets developed. GRAIL is departing from Pad B at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station Space Launch Complex 17. Pre-launch processing and the final countdown are managed by NASA's Launch Services Program at adjacent Kennedy Space Center.
Our team especially gets excited whenever we leave Earth orbit, and going to the moon excites us and it excites the public.
The 2 spacecraft, called GRAIL A and GRAIL B, are riding into space side by side aboard a powerful Delta II heavy rocket built by United Launch Alliance. It's a rocket with an impressive reliability record.
If we just look at the Delta II rocket, which was the version of the vehicle that we fly today, NASA has a perfect launch record, 48 for 48.
The payload for NASA's most recent lunar mission, called LRO L-Cross, weighed in at 6,600 pounds and was the size of a minivan. It launched in 2009 aboard a massive Atlas V rocket. But that extra performance isn't needed for the GRAIL spacecraft, which together weigh only about 1,600 pounds. Each unit is about the size of a washing machine, designed to be compact and rugged, a perfect fit for the Delta II. Preparing two spacecraft adds an extra challenge to the team's workload, from environmental testing before launch all the way through the countdown.
And then, for instance, on launch day, we have two dedicated teams, one to GRAIL A and one to GRAIL B, and they'll have to individually power up each spacecraft and go through their health checks and put the spacecraft in the proper configuration for launch.
After the climb to orbit, the GRAIL spacecraft will be released from the launch vehicle one at a time as launch controllers and managers on the ground wait for news of spacecraft separation.
So we will definitely wait to celebrate until both spacecraft are safe and on their translunar cruise to the moon.
GRAIL's journey to the moon will take 3.5 months, a mission plan offering plenty of time for controllers to make sure the spacecraft are ready to get to work.
And regardless of when we launch, we're going to have a constant arrival date. So GRAIL A will arrive on New Year's Eve of 2011 and GRAIL B will arrive on New Year's Day of 2012.
Each spacecraft will have to execute a critical 38-minute lunar orbit insertion burn to slide into lunar orbit. Then they'll spend the next 5 weeks reducing their orbit period and getting into formation. During the mission's 3-month science phase, the moon will rotate 3 times beneath the two GRAIL spacecraft as they calculate the gravity they encounter. One spacecraft will trail the other in orbit, and each will slow down or speed up in response to the changing gravitational pull from below.
And you need the two spacecraft to do that in order to measure the distance between the two very precisely.
This data will allow scientists an unprecedented chance to study the gravity of the whole moon, including the far side facing away from Earth, and envision the moon's interior from crust to core. The GRAIL mission also marks the first time students have a dedicated camera on board a planetary spacecraft in order to request photos of specific lunar targets. The MoonCam project is headed by Dr. Sally Ride, the first American woman to fly in space.
What students need to do is to go on mooncam.ucsd.edu, and that's how they register to submit images of the moon. And then the images will be put on the internet for the students to see.
At the mission's end, the GRAIL spacecraft will be decommissioned, eventually impacting the lunar surface. The path from the Earth to the moon has been well traveled in recent decades by pioneers like Surveyor, the Apollo astronauts, Lunar Prospector, and many more. Today, GRAIL is ready to take its place in its long line of lunar explorers.
The moment I'm looking forward to is when we finally get in formation flying and we're really ready to start taking science data for the mission.
I'm going to be passing Complex 17 about 3:30 a.m. on my way to Console. And that hour of the morning, looking off to the east, seeing the rocket bathed in spotlights, it's an emotional time for all of us on the launch team.
We're standing by now for a weather briefing from our launch weather officer, Dave Kraft, from the 45th Weather Squadron at Cape Canaveral. That will be followed by polling of the launch management team and the launch team in the Delta Operations Building in preparation for loading the cryogenic liquid oxygen on board the first stage. We're at T-minus 96 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. This is Delta Launch Control.
T-minus 96 minutes.
All personnel, a weather briefing will be conducted on the MetNet video on range 4 at T-minus 95 minutes.
LWO, RCN 8. LWO, RCN 8.
LO on 8.
Roger, stand by for the T-minus 95 weather brief.
Roger.
LD's on 8.
NLM on 8.
LC's on 8.
LW go ahead, proceed.
Roger. Looking at the western Atlantic, as you heard before, with Tropical Storm Maria, it's tracking over Antigua, 40 gusts, 50 knots. Closest point of approach is going to be 19Z today, and it'll be the storm will be about 6 miles south of the island as it makes its way. Here's an approximate position of Antigua at the cursor. And that storm should go northwest and recurve, not affect Florida. All during the week, this past week, we've had a plume of moisture, warm tropical air streaming over Florida. That has dissipated somewhat. Yesterday, if you remember, we had very thick clouds, cloud cover. Thick clouds were definitely a concern for yesterday. Not the case today looking at the present conditions. And this energy that went through last night is offshore with the thunderstorms and showers, and we're stabilizing behind it. However, we do have a surface boundary just to the north of us with some thunderstorms that have formed up on the boundary just northwest of Tampa. Some lightning strikes have been indicated over the water, mainly over the water, some over the land. But again, the amble and thick cloud that was encroaching on the land has continued to dissipate, and that's what we're expecting throughout the count and through the window. Looking at Florida, again, this is a good depiction of the how the area, if you look at the beginning of that loop, the cloud cover is dissipating as it gets into this area. Again, our amble tool here is a good tool showing us how far out these clouds of concern are. If it was at the point of the cursor, it'd be 1, 2, and 3 hours out to the 20-mile ring. The inner ring is 10 miles. Again, the boundary is to the north. We're expecting winds south of that boundary to the southwest. So southwesterly winds throughout the window and the count. And radar, really no showers on the radar screen, and looking at false echoes to the west and northeast. With those showers are well over 100 miles away. We're getting second trip echoes. We call those false echoes. But just slight indication to the west, just showing up on the screen of some upper level clouds. Right now, again, no concern. Again, space weather impacts not significant this morning. Peak winds not significant as well, 5 to 7 knots at Tower 2, 90-foot level. And the direction's holding at about 240 to 260. And the temperature currently about 75 degrees. We're expecting 76 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit for the window. Profiler, when this is in blue, 50 megahertz profiler data at 830Z matched up with the LR2 release at 829Z balloon. And it's you're looking at indications of in the low 20s at 8, 9, 10,000 feet, then decreasing at around 15,000 feet, then increasing again, starting at 20,000 feet, and that decreases roughly into the low teens, increasing again to upper 20s at 28 to 30,000 feet. Then there is a decrease again in the upper teens to 35,000 feet, then increasing again. So there is some shear. Doesn't appear to be as strong of shear as we saw 2 days ago, but there is some shear indicated, but again, doesn't appear to be as significant. Ops forecast, looking at scattered skies, unrestricted visibility, winds 230 at 10, peak gusts 15, just some isolated showers vicinity, and overall probability of weather constraint violation today is 20%. Ops commit criteria are all green. 24-hour delay forecast, just a 30% chance of probability of weather constraint violation with Q and flight through precip, as well on 48-hour. Same concerns. Q and probability of precip, 30%. That concludes my briefing. Are there any questions?
RC, no questions.